Hi there, my name is Tom Flagg, and I'm a professor in the Department of Anatomy, Physiology, and Genetics at the Uniformed Services University. I'm also a co-director of the Foundation in Medicine module, the first module of the pre-clerkship curriculum. I want to welcome you to the USU community, and I've put together a short lesson for the Ready, Set, Heal video series that I hope will help you as you prepare for the start of classes in August. I'm sure you're spending these last few weeks getting ready for medical school. You may not realize it, but you've really been preparing for this your whole life. All of the lessons that you learned from kindergarten through college have been preparing you to start medical school. A lot of the material that you studied for the MCAT is going to come back. Things that you've experienced in your life have been shaping you as a person and have allowed you to express your individual talents and abilities. The main piece of advice I have for you is to enjoy the rest of your summer and get prepared to work. Medical school is really a full-time job and it's going to dominate your life for much of the next 4 years. You've been successful enough to be accepted, and we're confident that you can be successful here. As you're waiting for August to arrive, you're probably experiencing a wide range of emotions, being confident and nervous, excited and scared all at the same time, and wondering what medical school is going to be like. Going to medical school is a big deal and something to be proud of. At the same time, medical school is just school, and you've been to school before. There's going to be lots and lots of studying. A good estimate of the time you'll devote to watching lectures, completing classwork, and studying on your own is about 60 hours a week. A lot of the material that you'll see is science stuff that you've already learned in high school and college. The big difference is going to be the pace. The material covered during a semester-long biochemistry course in college is going to be covered in just a few weeks in medical school. The goal is going to be to build on those core principles, add in more detail, and help you to see why it's relevant to clinical medicine and how those principles are applied to treat patients. In this short lesson, I'm going to go over some of the core principles of cell and molecular biology that I hope will help you to digest the content that you'll hear about in the Foundation module. To begin, let's talk about one of the most basic principles of biology and medicine, cell theory. The first cell was observed by Robert Hooke in 1665. This was only possible once the microscope had been invented. Hooke used a microscope to look at thin slices of cork, and there he observed spaces that he called cells where living material resided. It wasn't until 1839 that Schleiden and Schwann first articulated the principles of cell theory, and those principles have subsequently been refined as new information comes to light. Currently, there are 5 basic tenets of cell theory. The first is that the cell is the basic unit of life. All living things are composed of one or more cells, and cells in similar organisms share a similar overall organization. All cells are derived from pre-existing cells, and the activity of an organism is determined by the activity of the cells contained in it. Let's look at what these principles mean and how they apply to medicine. The first tenet is that all living things are composed of cells. Some organisms, like bacteria, are composed of just one cell. Some smaller organisms, like a fruit fly, have about 50,000 cells. A typical adult human is assembled from about 30 trillion cells. There are 2 major types of cells. Prokaryotes are single-celled organisms that lack a nucleus and other internal organelles. In these cells, DNA is going to be found in the cytoplasm. Eukaryotes, in contrast, are cells or organisms that contain a nucleus and other membrane-bound intracellular organelles. In eukaryotes, DNA is going to be found in the nucleus. The prototypical example of a prokaryote is a bacterium. Humans and other multicellular organisms are eukaryotes. Many of the cellular processes that occur in prokaryotes and eukaryotes are similar, but there are differences. In medicine, this is important since it allows for the development of things like antibiotics that selectively kill bacteria, but not human cells. All mammalian cells share a similar organization. There's a plasma membrane that defines the cell border, and this is comprised of a lipid bilayer that separates the inside of the cell from the outside of the cell. There's going to be a nucleus that contains the DNA that encodes the blueprint for the cell. There are ribosomes and rough endoplasmic reticulum that synthesize proteins. There's a Golgi apparatus that processes and modifies proteins. There's secretory vesicles that store proteins and other molecules that the cell will release into its surroundings. There are lysosomes that break down materials for discarding or recycling. And finally, there are mitochondria that are the powerhouses of the cell, synthesizing energy in the form of ATP. Deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA, is arguably the most important molecule in biology and medicine. The DNA in the nucleus of a cell contains almost all of the instructions required to create every cell of the body. I say almost all because one of the organelles, the mitochondria, also have a little bit of DNA that is necessary to create some important molecules in the cell. DNA is made up of two complementary strands of polynucleotides that wrap around each other in a double helical pattern. It kind of looks like a ladder that is twisted. In this twisted ladder, the rungs that hold the strands together are nitrogenous bases, adenine, thymine, guanosine, and cytosine, or ATGC. The different bases interact with each other through hydrogen bonding, such that A and T form pairs, while G and C interact with each other. Each DNA molecule can contain anywhere from 50 to 300 million bases, and the specific sequence of the bases in the DNA constitute genes that encode the proteins that are necessary for the cell to function. There are several different DNA molecules in a cell. Each of these molecules is called a chromosome, and they typically occur in pairs. Humans normally have a total of 46 chromosomes, 23 from each parent, and these chromosomes can be visualized in a karyotype. This is specific to the organism. A fruit fly only has a total of 8 chromosomes, while one of our closest ancestral relatives, the chimpanzee, has 48 chromosomes. Within the sequence of the base pairs in DNA is a code for assembling amino acids into proteins. The DNA is in the nucleus, and the protein synthesis machinery is in the cytoplasm and rough endoplasmic reticulum, so the code can't be read directly by the protein synthesis machinery. It must first be transcribed by enzymes in the nucleus that copy the code in the form of a single-stranded molecule similar to DNA called ribonucleic acid, or RNA. This messenger RNA, or mRNA, leaves the nucleus and goes to the cytoplasm, where the instructions can be read by ribosomes that join amino acids together to form proteins. And proteins perform almost all of the important functions of the cell. Cells don't form spontaneously. Cell theory holds that all cells originate from pre-existing cells. In humans, this occurs through a highly regulated process called mitosis. During mitosis, the cell is first going to duplicate the DNA of the cell, making an exact copy of the DNA. The nucleus is then going to break down, and chromosomes are going to condense to form tightly packed structures. Pairs of chromosomes are then going to line up at the equator of the cell, and one set of chromosomes is going to get pulled by microtubules to one side of the cell, while the other set gets pulled to the opposite side of the cell. Finally, the cell is going to split into two, with the result being two cells that have a complete set of chromosomes. All of the functions of the body are performed by cells, but you probably realize that humans are complex and need to have a lot of different things going on all at the same time. Therefore, different cells have been designed to do different things. For example, red blood cells are designed to carry oxygen and CO2, while some of the white blood cells are designed to attack and kill invading bacteria. Enterocytes are cells in the intestine that absorb the nutrients that you eat, And here's an example of a single cardiac myocyte from the heart that is contracting to pump blood through the circulation. Each of these cells looks different because it's optimized to perform a different function in the body, and therefore contains the proteins necessary to perform that function. An important thing to realize is that the instructions for all of the different cells are contained within the DNA, but each cell only uses the part that it needs to do its job. With 30 trillion cells all having to work together, you can imagine that cells need a way to talk to each other. The most common way that cells communicate is through chemical messenger systems. Things like neurotransmitters, hormones, chemokines, and cytokines are examples of molecules that get released from cells to communicate with each other. These chemical messengers bind to receptors on target cells. These receptors could be on the plasma membrane or inside the cell. And once the receptor is bound, this initiates additional chemical reactions inside the cell that leads to a response. A classic example of this is when your brain decides that you want to move, a nerve cell is going to release a neurotransmitter onto a muscle cell, telling it to contract. In fact, life depends on chemical reactions. There are probably millions of chemical reactions taking place all the time in the body. Things like the citric acid cycle that is important for generating ATP, or G-protein coupled receptor signaling cascades that modify cell function. These are just two examples, and there are many others, and it's these reactions that keep cells and organisms alive. Interfering with these reactions is going to change the way the body works and can result in disease, and a major goal of physicians is to figure out ways to control these chemical processes. To summarize, what I talked about here, cell theory, the central dogma of molecular biology, and the principles of cell communication, are really central to the practice of medicine. These are probably not totally foreign concepts. You've probably learned about these before and certainly studied them for the MCAT. Over the next year and a half, we're going to build on these basic principles, adding a detail here and there, and gradually build your medical knowledge so that you know how the human body works. And once we know how the human body works, we can use that knowledge to determine why the human body breaks down and how to fix it. That's really the goal of the next 18 months or so, and it all starts from these basic principles. To close, here's some advice that I hope will help you get through the pre-clerkship and beyond. Focus on the basic principles. Medicine can be very complicated, but if you really understand the basic principles, you can build on these simple ideas to help incorporate new information into your knowledge base. Don't approach medical school as if it's a whole bunch of random facts that need to be memorized. There are facts that you need to know, the name of different bones or different blood vessels, but what you really want to understand is the processes by which a human body normally works, so that you can design strategies to help fix it when it breaks. An approach that I like to use is to make stories. For example, I like to tell the story of what happens inside the body when you're sitting in front of the television eating a bag of potato chips or drinking a bottle of water. In the foundation module, you should be able to create a story of what happens in the body when it comes under attack from a bacteria or a virus. Review your study approach and know that cramming the night before an exam is not likely to work and is going to be detrimental in the long term. Remember that medical school is a competition of sorts. It's a competition to try to master medicine, and importantly, medicine doesn't always fight fair. Therefore, it's up to all of us to help each other to win. Make friends with your classmates and help each other to beat medicine. And don't forget the faculty is here to help too. And the number one piece of advice I have is to always be honest with yourself. Things happen. You might get sick, might have trouble finding a study approach, or might have something else going on in your life. If something comes up and you feel like you're struggling, don't ever hesitate to reach out to the Office of Student Affairs or to the module directors to ask for help or advice. We are here to help you. That brings us to the end. I hope you found this lesson useful. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and I look forward to meeting with you during orientation in August and working with you during the foundation module and beyond. Thanks for watching.